Second. Yeah, so, this is the Fireside talking about food tech and data analytics. Today we'll have Michael Zhao, Mike, come in and share his experience. So a bit about how I know Mike. So we were both um, university and university friends, and we also, worked together in consulting. So, throughout our whole transition from corporate to startups, we've, been following each other's journey. He's currently in Singapore, still working in consulting, but also running a few side gigs as well. Why don't we, start the chat by sharing, Mike, why don't you share a bit more about your background, what you're doing here?
Sure, fantastic. Thank you very much for the introduction, Will. So, as Will mentioned, I'm originally from consulting from Sydney. I moved to Singapore about a year and a half ago now, and since then I've done quite a fair bit in the startup space. But even before coming to Singapore, I was working on a project. It was a dating app that I'd worked on. So I started off by participating in the QLC program. I was actually one of the first candidates in the program, so it definitely was a good experience. I've also worked in a role as an entrepreneur in residence at JFDI. During that particular process, I worked on a menu design project, which inbuilt design optimization. From that point on, I moved on to another project, which is with a couple of people who have experience in F&B, and we're developing a data analytics platform. So essentially a business intelligence platform, but for F&B establishments. So it'll be restaurants and chains up to about 5 restaurants in size. So I've done the lean methodology process from start to end, and obviously have experienced a couple of failures along the way as well. So any questions you have, definitely feel free to throw them at me.
So tell me more about lean methodology. So you did an entrepreneur in residence project. For those who don't know what that is, an entrepreneur in residence is essentially you become an entrepreneur, an assigned CEO or COO of someone else's idea. Most of the times, you have an investor or another organization providing an idea, providing the funding, and you have someone who can execute. So it might be a consulting, engineering, or finance background individual coming in, and you help them execute the idea. So, Mike, why don't you tell a bit more about your experience doing an EIR stint with the Accelerator in Singapore?
Sure. So during my program period with the Accelerator, we worked on a few different sessions and a few different ideas. And the program was structured such that it taught you the lean methodology principles, obviously based on the original book and with some tweaks. And there were obviously a lot of hands-on sessions and a lot of mentoring in the progress. So the program was fantastic. I learned a lot of skills, but I guess to kind of hone in on the lean startup methodology and what I learned from the program in particular, for me, it was really about maximizing kind of the resources that you had to develop something and essentially validate and actually ensure what you're making is what people want. I think that's the crux of the question that's answered. Obviously, there are a lot of other questions you need to answer, whether something that's likely to be going to scale. But for me, at the very early stages, because you're trying to solve a pain point that has not been addressed in the past, may or may not have been addressed in the past, it's very important to actually think about the approach such that you're able to achieve the goals without developing something from start to end or end up with something that nobody wants to use. So the very, the very historical understandings of the lean startup methodology is obviously related to software design, software engineering. You wouldn't develop spend a year writing code and developing a product that no one wants. You would want to try and validate it and work out what people want and what would work as soon as possible. And that's what it's really all about. During my experience as part of the ERR program, I worked on a menu design program. It's actually going to be an app, and the idea is that you'd be able to essentially have the app design a menu for you to use at a restaurant with inbuilt design optimization. So if I just channel to my experiences working within the ERA program and what we actually did, there was a lot of obviously interviewing customers. So we visited a lot of the F&B joints in Singapore to understand what it is that they would want from a product like this. And the pain point, like we're really trying to target, is essentially a lot of restaurants have very ugly menus, and they do not want to spend a few $1,000s to engage a graphics design firm to be able to, design something from start to end. So this is supposed to be a good quality, simplified solution which will improve their sales, the image of the company. So what we did was we went out to interview a lot of the customers, and we developed what's called a concierge MVP. I'm sure you may or may not have heard that, but essentially we came up with a product, and we didn't design the code for it, but we tested the product as if the program had been implemented. So from my experience, that's really the crux of what you're trying to achieve, testing something without actually investing the full amount of resources you have and the time that you have.
So I'm really interested to hear about that end-to-end process. So, I mean, for example, for QLC, our concierge MVP was having the landing page, which can build up, over a weekend, and then, going to our customers and asking what they wanted. Once we received, a bit more insight on what they wanted, we would manually go and find a business, connect them together, and run a project. So that's as lean as you can, because you don't end up investing a lot of time to build the product, and you're just focusing on the customer first. Did you do something similar for your menu business?
Yeah, so what we did was we went to visit the restaurants that had an inclination of interest after we started talking to a key decision maker there. And we essentially offered them a solution. So we took a photo of their menu, we went back and essentially set up the technology, i.e. the graphics design process, such that would have a designer that will replicate what the software package will do, i.e. put the menu through an OCR program and then place the text onto a template. So that was like the skeleton framework of what we were aiming to do. And because we didn't have to invest in the resources to develop the software end to end, we're able to see what the output of that would be and what it would be received by the potential customer. So were they happy with that particular quality? I mean, obviously, if you have technology doing graphics design, you may or may not have something that comes out perfect. Were they happy with the turnaround time and it was experienced as something they wanted? So we did definitely try and go lean, and it was essentially a few weekends of working with restaurateurs and then working with designers, did a bit of designing ourselves, and then going back and essentially delivering the product as if it was from an app.
So basically, just to reiterate, you had the restaurant owner who's like, shit, my restaurant menu sucks, but I don't want to spend my weekends updating my crappy Word document. I would send it to Menuese. I'd be able to see a suite of different designs, font, typography, colors, images, even positioning. And then, once I submit that, it would essentially spit out a nice, sexy menu. Was that the...
That's pretty much it, yeah, you got spot on.
And what was the feedback from the restaurateurs like? Like, what was their feeling? Was it difficult dealing with quite an old industry?
So the feedback varied. There are a lot of restaurateurs in this country that are quite young. But obviously, there are obviously a lot of the older generation. So essentially, if you segment the market, we were targeting mostly the restaurateurs who, I guess, were of the younger generation and who are techie and had an understanding of technology and appreciated how apps can improve the way you do business, the way you operate, right? So the feedback of the actual products itself was good, and they enjoyed the experience. I essentially have someone take a photo or either take a photo themselves, send it away, and having them come back. So that feedback of the first half of the customer experience was fantastic. The second half of the customer experience, addressing the issues they had, was something that we were trying to work towards to optimize. So for example, it's very easy to have a photo sent through the software and have the photo processed and such that you have a menu output. However, at the end of that particular part of the phase, or rather the value chain, the next part of the value chain would be to tweak it such that the restaurateurs would have a final version that they were happy with, and that was a part that technology would be able to enable, but we were essentially trying to understand, how we can possibly reduce the cost of that, because we can't have someone obviously sitting there addressing every single menu. During the concierge MVP stage, it was fantastic. So we came up with a few solutions that worked things through. Essentially, we also spoke to a few restaurants to try and get their feedback as well. So overall, very positive feedback.
So what happened to the idea?
So what happened to the idea is my business partner actually left the country, and so she was actually in Singapore because she was here with her husband, who was studying in INSEAD, and then he graduated. So because I didn't have anyone to do it with, and I was working full time, it wasn't possible for me to do all the groundwork, obviously, the entire weekend. So that is on hold at the moment. The idea is on hold.
So what are you working on now? Is it still in the
Um,
F&B space?
Yeah, it is at F&B space. So I'm working with a couple of restaurateurs who have been in the industry for a while. So they operate a range of bars and restaurants. We're working on a business intelligence platform for restaurants in Singapore. So it is definitely in the F&B space and definitely an area of demand as well. So essentially, the idea is that a lot of restaurants that operate in small groups or as obviously single outlets have a lot of data from their POS, point of sale systems. They have a lot of transactional level data, which can be used to gain insight. So, for example, they might have indications of how much staff they need on a particular day and how much chicken or a particular dish they're selling well and what kind of marketing campaign is working well. Because of the POS data and the granularity of the data that's available, it's possible to generate a suite of data analytics products that will allow the restaurateur to make decisions that will add value to their business. So there are three tiers of the product that we're working on. The first one essentially is a static dashboard, which will give you the basic metrics, such as a common metric in the F&B industry is revenue per seat hour, which is essentially how much they're making per seat in the restaurant across the entire week, but obviously divided by the number of hours that they open. So that's an example of a metric that's used. The second tier of the product is essentially a live dashboard, which will allow you to understand and play around with the product as if it's like a what if scenario generator. So what happens if we tweak this particular variable? And the third layer is essentially a higher end, which is kind of like an overall consulting service, which would be more specialized. So definitely, that's something which is burgeoning in Singapore and also obviously has been in the US as well. And we're trying to definitely break into that space. So the way I guess the team works is the people I'm working with have the essential experience in the F&B space, and obviously I have experience working with the technology in the lead startup methodology, and also my background is in modeling as well in my day job. So I'm contributing quite a fair bit to the data analytics algorithms and so on and so forth.
So it's really interesting because like your background was never in the F&B space, and for those, um, I mean, like for me, like I've always wanted to start my own food truck or become a chef on the side. But it sounds as though like even though you're not like traditionally in the F&B space, you can still apply what your current skills are to that particular space. Like, how did you become drawn to food?
Yeah, so um, I have an interest in food. I love food, so that's something that always been by me. I guess with the way that you understand on how to operate a business and how to apply the lean methodology, the actual industry that you're applying to requires a bit of obviously teething, if you like. However, if you understand how to operate a venture and how to essentially test something, test a product. It really doesn't matter which particular industry per se that you dive into. The core thinking and the frameworks that you apply, the lean methodology frameworks you apply remain largely similar across a number of industry. Sure, definitely. I'm not discounting the fact that some industries have some granularities and have some knowledge that you need to know to be able to run well. But obviously, that will come with experience and time. So I think just to answer your particular question, definitely it is possible and definitely approachable to jump into a range of industries if you have the experience thinking with a lean methodology mindset and essentially establishing ventures. But you do need to just be cognizant of the fact that there is obviously a period where you need to be applying yourself and learning the nuances of the industry. And the other aspect is obviously getting to know people who have experience in the industry because they will essentially be the brains that will fill the gaps and experiences that you may or may not have.
Do you think it's a very consulting thing to be able to apply methodologies and frameworks and you know your background to an industry? Like I don't know, like I feel the same way. My team comes from a consulting background, and
Mm.
it's kind of like you throw us into any industry, and it's quite easy to adapt. Do you feel the same way? Like, what are your thoughts on testing different industries?
I think it's like you mentioned, it is similar to consulting in the sense that you need to get up to speed with certain industries. However, I think the with startups and also applying these particular skill sets, it's much I guess more the skill set's a bit more transferable than consulting because consulting requires you to understand an industry in quite a fair bit of detail. Whereas I think with startups in particular, um, the learning curve is not as steep because essentially we're harnessing the power of technology to be able to address pain points, to be able to build a venture, and to have customers that will want a service or product, right? So the mindset, the goal remains the same. It's just essentially which particular customers that you're looking into and what are the constraints and the boundaries you're working with. So I think it's all about kind of being agile, being able to operate under different ambiguous environments.
What would you say are the quite transferable skills from the corporate world to the startup world to just general skills that you've picked up? Like it sounds as though if you could harness like a suite of skills, it should be quite easy to pick up. Or is
Yeah,
it just common sense?
yeah, no, definitely a lot of common sense, right? But I think there are probably two things for me that kind of stand out. So, first and foremost, working in the corporate world obviously teaches you to structure your ideas, structure your thinking quite well, because it is a regimented way of working. Essentially, you report to your boss, and then there's fixed timelines and that different processes that you follow. People who work in consulting, for example, you work at different clients who have different ways of doing things. So you pick up a lot of skills in the sense that you're able to structure a problem and plan it out in your head very well, such that you're kind of not wandering out in the sea. The second point I guess I'll make is essentially you're able to I guess address issues and communicate issues well, and that's obviously a key point in being able to keep yourself running when you come across roadblocks when you're launching your venture slash project. So I think that's something which is quite important, being able to, I guess, articulate to people what it is you're trying to sell to them and why is it that they need it. So that's the sales side of things, and the second side essentially is actually convincing them that the nuances of the problem or whether it's dealing with potential investors or partners what the details of your product is. So I think communication and being able to structure your thinking and obviously the innovation and side also comes in. So it's a whole suite of skills that I think you hone over time, and the more you do it, the more you improve at it. So I mean, straight out of college, it's probably quite rare you find a whole bunch of people who are quite well attuned to this, but it does require quite a fair bit of, I guess, practice. And the more you do it, the more you engage it, you will learn from what it is that didn't work in the past, and then you will apply that to the next thing that you do in the future. And you got just got to keep making, got to keep um, making sure that you're actually learning from what it is that you're doing and you're moving forward.
All right, that's a very consultant answer.
That's a very consulting answer. Okay.
Yeah. Um, okay, so you're obviously like balancing two things at once. So you have the startup hustle life, you
Mhm.
have the corporate, you know, consulting background. What How do you balance that? How do you manage like, a full-time job and doing a few side gigs, especially if you're, in a role that's already quite high demanding and also trying to build a startup that's, quite on the ground. It involves a lot of time thinking, but also execution.
Yep. So a couple of ways, I guess you can. I mean, we're kind of entering into how you organize your time and plan your entire week out now, right? But I think if you have a goal that you want to work towards, let's say a 1 week or 2 week goal with your startup, um, it helps to make a plan of what you need to do, such that it works with both your obviously your professional work, your corporate slash consultancy, whatever it is, and also with your venture. So I think planning is something sometimes not looked up on as in a favorable light as it should be. But when you have time constraints, you need to plan because you need to prioritize what is most important that will get you the results you want. So that's one thing I think I've learned from my experiences. The other thing is to partner with the right people and essentially work with people who are able to work with your schedule and also have the time. Obviously, it's very possible and definitely very common that people do ventures by themselves. But if someone is working full time and long hours during the week, it helps to have a team of one or two people who are equally as dedicated that you could obviously work alongside with. The benefit of working with someone else is also because you can bounce ideas off them. And everyone has different ways of thinking something, right? Thinking through a problem. So that's quite important as well.
How do you find so you talk about like the balance of finding the right
Yep.
people to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So in your position of being full time with your day job, and also doing side gigs, how do you firstly find the network of
Yep.
the right community to focus on ideas outside of work, and
Mm-hmm.
secondly, how do you actually go to pick your partners?
Yep. So in terms of meeting people, I started doing this already back when I was in Australia. There are definitely people who would be in your existing workplace that you would get along with. So naturally, you would actually identify those people who are also interested in ventures. It'll be important to actually understand who are the people who are saying they are interested versus the ones who are actually hustling. So that's one key thing I think you'll notice as you get more and more, I guess, ingrained in the process with them. So that's one way, obviously, in workplace. Secondly, I think this that's probably one of my pastimes that I enjoy, and that's just going to essentially networking events where there are a lot of entrepreneurs and essentially startup founders or people interested in startups. So there are obviously programs you can join, such as I did, the Entrepreneurs in Residence program. There's obviously the Founders Institute program as well, where you would meet people. You can also meet people at meetup.com meetups. That's another way to do it. But essentially, I think once you know a few people who are interested in this, they'll also have similar and like-minded um, individuals in their network. And I think it's also important to not discount the fact that if you just go to a party or like a gathering with a few mates, you actually probably meet someone who's also interested in a similar thing to you. So I think meeting people, especially in a cosmopolitan environment, will come by if you show that you're genuine, you're willing to engage. In terms of identifying the people that you want to work with, I think it's important that obviously you guys get along in terms of your goals as well as communicating ideas and making sure that the other person is as committed as you are. So by that I mean actually matching the level of commitment that you guys want to put in. If someone wants to do it 7 days a week full time, you got time for probably about 2 days a week on the weekend, that's probably not going to work because they're going to be doing a lot more work than you are because they have more time, right? So it's also just matching those expectations and understanding what it is that people are willing to put in, especially at an earlier stage where essentially you're doing it part-time. I think you'll notice a lot of people kind of say they're interested, but have stopped putting the hours and the working because essentially you'll be people are doing it for free, right? It's obviously not a paid job at the very beginning. So if you identify the ones who continue to apply themselves and essentially put in the hours without having you to keep chasing them or forcing them to do something with you, then I think those the kind of the partners that you want to engage with and work towards something with.
And have you like tell us your like the good or bad experiences that you had
Yeah.
you
So
with finding the right people?
I worked with I've worked with another participant of the JFDI Entrepreneurs in Residence program for a while. That was the menu design startup, and she was fantastic. So she had the same kind of entrepreneurial drive and the same kind of the same commitment to this particular project. And I mean, we did all the interviews together, and we met up on a number of weekends, spending the whole weekend trying to work through these problems and developing the concierge MVP and working out what it is that we want to actually throw out to the market and test. So so that was definitely a good experience. You can definitely tell if someone's keen with, I guess, their response rate. Keeping in mind that people may have busy schedules during the week, but and also essentially understanding how they engage with you and whether it is just a quick phone call and they are essentially going to do something else, or rather it is that they actually want to try and discuss with you and develop a solution to something out of this conversation. So that particular person I worked with was fantastic. I've also spoken to a few people in the past, people that I may have seemed they were interested, but they were not as interested after you start to speak to them. Um, Essentially, I think you need to just meet as many people as you can and work out who will work with you. It may be the case that you two people are very interested in working with each other, um, but because of the way that you work and also the way that you communicate and engage with people, it may not work out. And this is particularly relevant for people, I guess, like myself, who aren't doing this full time yet and are rather doing this part time. So it's something that I think you'll pick up over time.
So in your experience, working in the F&B and data analytics space, where do you see the trend is? Like, what are you looking for as a, entrepreneur to be or someone trying to get into this space? What is big? Data analytics is your background at work. Is that what you think is going to be huge in the startup space, or are you just going there because that's what you know best?
Yeah, so I think it is a space that is burgeoning and had been in the past as well. For the corporate environment, this has been an area of growth for a long time. And my personal view is that it hasn't quite reached that stage in the SME and the small business level yet, slash startup level. And it's an opportunity to essentially capitalize on a lot of the niches that are currently underserved. A lot of people recognize that operators such as e-commerce businesses have a lot of data and have begun capitalizing on that. But there are obviously a lot of organizations which have data which is essentially structured, but are not traditional users of these services. And I'm a firm believer that I guess the longer into the future that you look, the more data that all businesses will have. So there will be a stage where almost all operations will have access to a data set that they have produced using their own processes, whether it's just transactions or some kind of research that will require some kind of data analytics service. So it's really about trying to find the niche for me and working out what it is that will be, I guess, the next big consumer of these services.
So you're doing the data analytics like space for F&B. What are your thoughts on where that's going?
Yeah, so currently there is challenges associated with that, and it's primarily around um, making the process seamless such that uh, you're able to provide a product that restaurateurs could use seamlessly to produce insights for them. So a lot of operators in the DA space are not professional, I guess, analysts or have been in the past, right? They may be chefs who have opened their own venture, and I think the last thing they want to do is worry about setting up the actual systems and defining the metrics themselves and looking through the data themselves. So it's about creating an end-to-end process whereby the data goes from a platform and goes into servers where the analytics happens, and then it gets transferred essentially to multiple output methods, whether it be a dashboard or a visualization engine. So I think the challenges with that are definitely present, i.e. downloading the data of systems that aren't connected to the cloud. A lot of operators use traditional point of sale systems that are quite different in its own individual rights. They are not standardized, so that's going to be a challenge. And going forward, I think there is definitely a lot of potential for this, especially given that going into the future, a lot of operators will be using more integrated cloud-based systems. And it will also be an opportunity to capitalize on a market whereby if there is an entity that has access to a lot of the data of organizations or F&B outlets in a particular region, then that's very powerful because it allows you to do a lot of benchmarking. But even beyond that, um, working through ideas that relate to predictive analytics and understanding trends and staffing levels and cohesively managing the F&B ecosystem in a particular place. So that's something that obviously is um, quite a foray into the future, but it's definitely a possibility.
So what does that mean for you? Are you currently searching for the next thing, or are you planning to, keep it as a side gig? What's the
So I
best?
have to see how it goes. Obviously, right at this point in time, I'm working at PwC and I've not done anything quite drastic just yet. So it'll depending, I guess, on the outcome and if it is something that people want and we're able to implement at this moment.
That's really cool. Uh, what would your advice be to those people in corporate looking to get involved with side gigs?
Yeah, so my advice would be to commit yourself to a side project, essentially that doesn't require you to take a lot of risk. For example, that doesn't require you to quit your job. If you, I think if you dive in and actually work on something with someone, you'll know if it's something that you enjoy doing or if it's something that kind of seem like nice and shiny from the outside, and when you're actually doing the grunt work, it's not as appealing. The more that you actually expose yourself to, the more of an understanding that you'll have. Without trying, you'll never know what's going to work or whether it's something you want to pursue further, right? So I guess you have to kind of go in with an approach where you're not really going to regret anything. And really, there isn't that much opportunity cost except for your time, but you're exploring something that will possibly be something that will take up, your career in the future. Um, so I guess my point is it's important to actually immerse yourself and to gain exposure. And the second point to follow on from that is finding the right ins and meeting the right people that you could work on something with. Like reading a book is fantastic and you'll learn a lot. But until you start talking to people who are in the space by the means of whether it's networking circles that your mates made, or whether it be at events, or whether it be just slowly, obviously engaging programs like QLC, it's definitely something that is not possible to miss out on. For example, we can all make a choice, right? We can all put our hands down right now and not do anything. But if you take the riskless step of trying something, you'll know for sure if it's something when you try future or not. So
That's that's pretty deep.
yeah, very deep, right?
It's very deep. I guess last couple of questions, Mike.
Sure.
So, what has changed since? Because I knew you, back in Australia when you were very focused on, the career path of hitting, MD hitting partner, going down the full-fledged corporate route. What's changed since moving over to Asia, moving into doing a few startups yourself, failing? Like what's that outside of corporate experience done to change your mind, change the way that you view the world, so to speak?
Yeah, so I guess you're hitting on I guess the change in perspective, right? So I mean, regards to the fact that I actually moved to a different country, that was a change in perspective. But just entering and speaking to people and working with people who are outside of my traditional industries, you will, I guess, achieve two main things. You will learn more about that industry, and you'll learn new skills that you can apply to your current job. So regards to the fact that I'm a consultant, the skills and the exposure that I've gained working in a space that's not in consulting, not corporates, have helped me to understand what it is that I need to do in my day job better as well. So that's something I've changed, definitely perspective and new skills. And also, obviously, another area that can't be dismissed is the fact that you also learn more about yourself and what you want to get out. So whether it will be you want to try and pursue and work on a startup part-time that can be a side gig permanently, or whether it be something you want to do full-time, or whether it be, it's not quite for me. I prefer to stick with the corporate life. There's everything in between. I personally think it'd be fantastic to have a side gig go with my day job, because there are a lot of businesses that you can operate just on the weekend, and doesn't require you to have that much upfront capital now, obviously, with the fact that you can leverage technology to implement and launch in a very lean manner.
Any questions from the crowd? I see, Simba, you're back on the call, but we also have another viewer who's just viewing as an audience. You can type in a question in the chat box, but were there any other questions?
I had a question. I'm not sure whether you've just covered it, because I heard you talking a bit about working and doing something on the side. But how did you manage to do both? I know consulting can be quite taxing, and how then do you manage what you're required to do, especially when you're working with a partner? You're required to do something for your side gig, but you're required to do a lot for your day job as well.
Sure, thanks very much for that question. I think it's a fantastic question. So I guess I'll explain my circumstances and I guess my schedule. So as busy as I guess corporate job gets, and as consulting, I guess banking or whatnot gets, there will be times where they're busy, and there'll be times where they are relatively quiet. So sometimes I guess when you're not on a particularly busy engagement, you will not be in the office at midnight. Sometimes you may be. So it's about managing when you can do certain things, and making sure that you prioritize the tasks. So, for example, if it is that weekend that you have free, I guess it's really about being disciplined, and it's up to you to actually get it done, because if you don't do it, it will not get done, right? So I guess the first part of the answer to your question is prioritizing the most important tasks. For example, if you want to get a landing page done by this weekend, you work out in your schedule when it's going to work. You may put in an hour each weeknight, or you may have 5 hours one weeknight to get it done, or you may have the entire day on Sunday when you don't need to be working. I hope you won't need to be working on a Sunday. And the other obviously aspect to it is having essentially a partner or a project partner that you could play tag team with. There's a lot of tasks in running early stage ventures where you can allocate and run in parallel. For example, one person could essentially do the landing page, so to speak. Other one could be running the concierge MVP, and then essentially engaging with potential customers via email. There's a lot of stuff that you can do remotely as well. You don't technically have to be present physically to be able to get things done. So I think all in all, you need to essentially just work out the free time slots you have in a week, and being realistic about your expectations. Obviously, granted, it will take longer to set up something that if you're doing it part-time, but I think it all comes down to commitment in the end, and working it out and planning out the time slots you have free, and maximizing the time that you have, which is I guess something that you'd do if you apply the lean methodology to try and start this thing.
Okay, good, thanks. And I also had a question around the internship that you did. Is that something that was specifically offered by the accelerator that you were involved with, or is it something that's available elsewhere? And also, did that mean then you had to take a break from your full-time job and do that for a while before you came back?
Sorry, just to clarify, you're talking about the internship. So I did a couple of I guess gigs, if you like. So the first one I did was a QLC program, obviously. So I worked with a company that has been specialized in data markets, essentially live data streams, so on and so forth. So I did that part time, and through QLC I set that up essentially with a particular founder, and we had a working relationship where we had deliverables every week. It was an learning experience for me. The JFDR Entrepreneurs in Residence program was something that I did through QSC by Will as well. Essentially, that particular project was also done part time, so it required me to essentially work with the JFD entrepreneurs and as well as QLC on some of the weeknights and also the weekend as well. So I didn't personally take any time off full-time work. So I was able to fit it into my schedule quite neatly. There were some weeks where I would miss a session, but I'll be able to obviously make up the time on a separate day. So it really comes down to kind of you making the time for it and balancing it as well.
Hey Simba, so there's actually quite a few EIR or entrepreneur in residence gigs available around the world. Most of them are supplied by either accelerators or venture funds. What I can do is let's have a chat about it separately offline. We can talk about where you can actually start finding those type of programs. The reason why they're really good is you actually become immersed into building your own startup, and even better, it's occasionally funded by their investors or by the accelerator itself.
Yep, that would be good. Thanks, Will.
So I guess last question from me, Mike, before we close it off, is how do you stay motivated? It sounds really taxing to have, every week you need to hit those milestones. You need to make sure that you need to get shit done. But, I mean, how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, how do we stay motivated to do anything right now? So I think really it comes down to what your end goal is. I mean, if you're going to do something, for me personally, when I do something, I want to try and finish it and learn something from it and actually achieve something from that, right? So personally, I have a lot of drive, and that helps me stay motivated. But it's just I think achieving those small milestones along the way. Like I think when we were doing the menu design, we were talking to a few people on the weekends. There were a few times we were speaking about like 5-10 restaurants, and they were just not interested in what we had to offer. So you regroup with a particular partner you're working with, and you essentially decide on what the best next step is to address those issues you are having. So I think when you have those small wins along the way, it definitely keeps you being motivated. And it's kind of like, oh, somebody actually enjoys talking to me about your product, right? So you'll find that most people that you first speak to about your thing may or may not be interested, but definitely won't be excited. So I think it's about pushing through that barrier and reaching the stages where you've realized that you need to be targeting the right people. As you do it, as the more you kind of engage in this BD activity, so to speak, the more you realize the people you need to be speaking to and that there are people who are interested. So I think really having those milestones and having someone by your side, a co-founder or partner, will help you along the way.
Cool. Well, I think that's everything from our end. Thanks so much for your time again, Mike. Appreciate. You're still in your suit, so I'm guessing you're still in the office. Maybe another tip for Simba if you're doing this: see if you can sneak in time to do your side gig during work.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll close the call for now. But again, thanks so much, Mike. Is it okay? I'll leave the email I will leave your email to our participants, and if they have any other questions, I can.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, thanks so much. I'll be closing the call. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
All right, thanks for the time, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, bye.